Very good morning, all of you. Already we have discussed imaginary number. Today we are going to discuss integral power of I. I to the power 0 is defined as 1. Now positive integral power of I. I to the power 1 root over of minus 1. I square equals minus 1. Since I square equals root over of minus 1 whole square equals minus 1. I cube equals minus I. Since I cube equals I square into I equals minus 1 into I equals minus I to the power 4 equals 1. Since I to the power 4 equals I square into I square equals minus 1 into minus 1 equals 1. In order to compute I to the power n for n greater than 4, we divide n by 4 and obtain the remainder r and m be the quotient. So you can write n equals 4m plus r. When we are dividing n by 4, let we are getting m be the quotient and r be the remainder. So n equals 4 into m plus r. Dividend equals divisor into quotient plus remainder. Implies I to the power n equals I to the power 4m plus r equals I to the power 4m into I to the power r. I to the power 4 to the power m into I to the power r equals 1 to the power m into I to the power r equals I to the power r. So where n greater than 4, I to the power n equals I to the power r. Here r is the remainder. Thus, the value of I to the power n for n greater than 4 is I to the power r, where r is the remainder when n is divided by 4. For r equals to 0, I to the power n equals I to the power r equals I to the power 0 equals 1. For r equals to 1, I to the power n equals I to the power 0, I to the power 1 equals I. For r equals to 2, I to the power n equals I to the power r equals I square equals minus 1. For r equals to 3, I to the power n equals I to the power r equals I cube equals minus I. So evaluate I to the power 6. At first you divide 6 by 4. You are getting remainder is 2. So we can write I to the power 6 equals I to the power 4 to the power 1 into I square. I to the power 4 to the power 1 into I square. I to the power 4 is 1 into I square is minus 1. So I to the power 6 equals minus 1. I to the power 10. I to the power 4 to the power 2 into I square. We are dividing 10 by 4. You are getting 2 is the quotient and 2 is the remainder. So 1 into I square minus 1 equals minus 1. I to the power 7. I to the power 4 to the power 1 into I cube equals 1 into I cube is minus I. I to the power 7 equals minus I. I to the power 10 equals minus 1. Let I to the power 19. I to the power 19. You divide 19 by 4. 4 4s are 16. 3. So I to the power 4 to the power 4 into I cube. I to the power 4 is 1. 1 to the power 4 1 into I cube is minus I. You are getting minus I. I to the power 19 equals minus I. Let I to the power 135. I to the power 4 to the power 33 into I cube. One 35 leaves remainder 3 when it is divided by 4. So 1 into minus I equals minus I. Let I to the power 998. I to the power 998 equals I to the power 4 to the power 249 into I square. I to the power 4 is 1 to the power 249 is 1 into I square is minus 1. So we are getting minus 1. I to the power 200 equals I to the power 4 to the power 50 into your remainder is 0. I to the power 0 equals 1 into 1 equals 1. So when the power is divided by 4, we are getting the remainder 0 less than equals to or less than 4. Either the remainder may be 0 or 1 or 2 or 3. If the remainder is 0, then the integral power of I will be 1. If remainder is 1, then it will come I. If remainder is 2, then it will come I square equals minus 1. If remainder is 3, then it will come I cube equals minus I. So again we discuss negative integral power of I. Negative integral power of I. By the law of indices, I to the power minus 1 equals 1 by I to the power 1 equals 1 by I. We can write instead of 1 I to the power 4 by I equals I cube equals minus I. So 1 by I equals minus I. A to the power minus n equals 1 by a to the power n. I to the power minus 2 equals 1 by I square equals 1 by minus 1 equals minus 1. I to the power minus 3 equals 1 by I cube. We can write I to the power 4 by I cube equals I. I to the power minus 4 equals 1 by I to the power 4 equals 1 by 1 equals 1. So if n greater than 4, if n greater than 4, I to the power minus n equals 1 by I to the power n equals 1 by I to the power r, where r is the remainder when n is divided by 4. Now we evaluate I to the power minus 6 equals 1 by I to the power 6 equals 1 by I to the power 4 to the power 1 into I square equals 1 by I to the power 4 is 1 into I square is minus 1 equals minus 1. I to the power minus 24 equals 1 by I to the power 24 equals 1 by I to the power 4 to the power 6 into I to the power 0 equals 1 by 1 into 1 equals 1. Let I to the power minus 45 equals 1 by I to the power 45 equals 1 by I to the power 4 to the power 11 into I to the power 1 equals 1 by 1 into I equals 1 by I. This 1 by I is minus I. Similarly, I to the power minus 999. We can write I to the power 999 equals 1 by I to the power 4 to the power 249 into I cube. This equals 1 by 1 into I cube equals 1 by I cube equals I to the power 4 by I cube equals I. I to the power minus 999 equals I. Now evaluate root over of minus a into root over of minus b. We can write root ai into root bi equals root over of ab I square. The value of I square equals minus 1, so root over of minus ab. Root over of minus a into root over of minus b equals root over of minus ab. Now evaluate 1 plus I whole square equals a square plus 2ab plus b square equals 1 plus 2i minus 1 equals 2i. Let minus of root over of minus 1 whole to the power 4n plus 3, n belongs to n. We can write minus I to the power 4n plus 3 equals minus I to the power 4n into minus I to the power 3. This equals minus I to the power 4 whole to the power n into minus I cube equals I to the power 4 to the power n into minus of minus I cube is minus I. So 1 into I equals I. Now show that I to the power n plus I to the power n plus 1 plus I to the power n plus 2 plus I to the power n plus 3 equals 0 for all n belongs to n. You take LHS, I to the power n, I to the power n plus 1, I to the power n plus 2, I to the power n plus 3. We can write I to the power n is common, 1 plus I square plus I cube. I to the power n whole into 1 plus I square is minus I cube minus I square is minus 1, I cube minus I. Then I to the power n into 0 equals 0. So in this way, we can evaluate any negative integral or positive integral of I. Next class, we will discuss complex number. Thank you.